So about some time ago, had a conversation with this brother, and he was, again, rephrasing. He said, look, how do you understand the New Testament God when Jesus says, if somebody strikes you on one cheek, turn them the other one, and do not resist who is evil, to how God told the Israelites in the Old Testament to go and kill the people of the land, do not spare their wives or children. So how do you reconcile that God told Israel to do this versus he's telling the new covenant people this? How do you reconcile those two concepts? And on the way, obviously Rose and I, we were talking, and she expressed the same difficulty for other people, how to answer the question why children suffer, why children die. And I've had this conversation from other people who is almost an obstacle. It's a huge obstacle for them to come to faith, and often hardens their heart and turn away from faith because of their lack of understanding on these subjects. And I was telling Rose that I had quite a bit of time to think about these subjects because I was, my son was suffering for a long time, and I experienced this firsthand. So it wasn't like a pie in the sky for me. It was just why is God allowing something if he's sovereign? So a lot of the things I share are years of my kind of like meditations and trying to reconcile some thoughts and understand the mind of God. So how I hope I'm successful in trying to express what I see God thinks or sees. And so that's part of that. So why does God allow children suffer? We talked about 2 weeks ago why God won't, allow Israel to kill the females. But today we're going to talk about the children or the youngsters. And on the other side, my daughter also she expressed that she wanted to be baptized. So she has done it a number of occasions, and I've seen that she's very zealous about it. And I had some thoughts on that. And for some reason, we just did not get a chance to do it in privately about it. I thought maybe I can connect these two thoughts together because they're related. How does God see children, and when are they able to make that decision to follow him? So there are going to be some interesting elements working together. But if you look out and try to find some reliable resource, you will find very little information on the subjects. People use the word the age of accountability. I don't like that word for some reason. I just like to kind of use what Bible seemed to be showing us, and some of the adjective that God uses to describe the youngsters. We're going to look at those things. We're going to kind of chew on those concepts, and with the hope that we can have a better picture of how God sees children. So, one of the best place, or what is the only place that I think that we can go, is about Israel's past. So we have Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt. He takes the nation of Israel out of Egypt. They're in the desert, and they are going to go into the promised land that God told them to go. So in that period, God already starts to separate the nation of Israel. He starts using certain adjectives to describe some of the age groups. So we're going to look at some of those. Why don't we start with let me just get there myself. Numbers 14. So I'm going to make a lot of assumptions that you know the story. If you do not know the story, that's why I'm recording it, so that you can actually go back, read the story, so that you know the context of what I'm sharing. So Numbers chapter 14. Again, it's going to be recorded. You can just access it from ChristsFamily.org, or the YouTube channel we have, which is ChristsFamily.org. There's a situation here where Israel is supposed to send 12 spies into the land of Canaan. They go in, they come back out, and they are disheartened. They're terrified. Even though God told them that they will take this place and it will become their home, because of their lack of faith, and they see the people that are living there, the people are more numerous, more powerful, and bigger, they're frightened. When they come back, they give this report to the people of Israel. It says, we're going to start in Numbers chapter 13. We can start in verse 31. Then the men who had gone up with him said, "We're not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. For they brought to the sons of Israel an evil report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the Nephilim and the sons of Anak, who have come from the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, so we seemed to them. Then all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night." So what happens is that they are terrified. They just know that they're outnumbered. These people are stronger. There's no way. There's just no way they can do it. And because of their lack of faith, God says, none of you guys are going to ever enter this land because of your lack of faith. Because they were murmuring, because they were complaining, because they were grumbling all the way from Egypt to here, and now from here onwards, God does not, he makes a separation. This is what he says. This is verse 26 of 14. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "How long shall this wicked congregation murmur against me? I've heard the murmuring of the sons of Israel, which they murmur against me. Say to them, as I live, says the Lord, what you have said in my hearing, I will do to you. Your dead bodies shall fall in this wilderness, and all of you are numbered. Number from 20 years old and outwards, who have murmured against me. Not one shall come into the land where I swore that I would make you dwell, except the son of Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun. But your little ones, whom you said will become prey, I'll bring in. They shall know the land which you have despised. But as for you, your dead bodies shall fall in this wilderness, and your children shall be the shepherds in the wilderness 40 years, and shall suffer for your faithlessness, until the last of your dead bodies lies in the wilderness." So, God makes a distinction between the 20 years and older and the youngers. The 20 year and older are not allowed to come into the promised land. In Deuteronomy chapter 1, he gives us a little bit more information. Verse 39. It says, it's verse 34, let's start there. "And the Lord heard your words and was angry, and he swore, not one of these men of this evil generation shall see the good land which I swore to give to your fathers. Except Caleb the son of Jephunneh, he shall see it. And to him and to his children I'll give the land upon which he has trodden, because he has wholly followed the Lord. The Lord was angry with me also on your account, and said, you also shall not go in there. Joshua the son of Nun, who stands before you, he shall enter. Encourage him, for he shall cause Israel to inherit it. Moreover, your little ones, you have said, will become a prey, and your children, to this day, have no knowledge of good or evil, shall go in, and to them I will give it. So, what is God thinking? He says 20 years and above, they're not allowed to go in. The youngsters can come in.
What verse was the youngsters?
Verse 39. You want to read it on your own translation to see what it says? Well, since we're recording, I'll read it again. Moreover, your little ones, who you said would become a prey, and your children to this day have no knowledge of good or evil, shall go in there, and I to them I'll give it, and they shall possess it. So what are the two words, adjective, that God is using to describe what are some of the adjectives? He says, your children that are less than 20 years old, to this day have no knowledge of good or evil. How is that so? Doesn't children know good or evil?
Yeah.
And surprisingly, in the Greek translation of the Old Testament, Numbers 14 has this. Same thing is repeated. This is Numbers 14. It says in verse 23, they certainly shall not see the land I swore to their fathers, but their children who are here with me do not know good nor evil. Every inexperienced youngster, to these I shall give the land. And how does God seize the youngsters? He himself says, their children who are here with me and who do not know good nor evil, every inexperienced youngster, to these I shall give the land. Somehow God makes a distinction between the 20 and above and 19 and less. And he uses these words himself to describe this population. What are those words? These people do not know the good nor evil, every inexperienced youngster, to these I shall give the land. But early on in Genesis, we are actually told in chapter 8. Look at what Genesis chapter 8 says.
Nice.
Verse 20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took of every clean animal and of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. When the Lord smelled the pleasing odor, the Lord said in his heart, I'll never again curse the ground because of men, for the imagination of the man's heart is evil from his youth. God is well aware that imagination of a man's heart is evil from the youth. There's no new news that children are evil. They generate evil thoughts and they do evil things. They lie just like a grown-up. They complain and grumble just like a grown-up. And they can be, you can accuse them of all kinds of things. So why does God himself, who knows, who made human in his own image and likeness, uses these adjectives to describe people that are younger than 20? They that do not know the good or evil, any inexperienced youngster. Only thing I can understand is that even though he knows or he sees that we're wicked from what is the word? Imagine from his youth is evil, he knows that we have not made our mind yet. That we have not turned our back against them yet. So he doesn't keep us responsible yet. Therefore, he allows the youngsters to come in, even though not because of their merit, not because of he just doesn't count it against them. And I'm using the adjectives that he's using. He calls them who do not know the good from evil. Any inexperienced young youth. I will do this. And he echoes this, he actually emphasizes in 3 different places. So, number 1, he allows this population to come into the land of Canaan. Right? They will all enter it, not because of their merits. Number 2, let's go to Numbers chapter 1. There are 3 places he makes a distinction between the 20 and above and less than 20.
What was that book again?
Deuteronomy chapter 1. Let me get there.
You said chapter 1?
Chapter 1. We're going to start like... I'm sorry. Did I say... I said Numbers chapter 1. I apologize. If I said Deuteronomy, I'm not Deuteronomy.
Moses summoned all Israel and said, "Hear, O Israel, the decrees and laws I declare in your hearing today."
We're going to start in verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting on the first day of the 2nd month, in the 2nd year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying, "Take a census of all the congregations of the sons of Israel, by families, by fathers' houses, according to the number of names. Every male, head by head, from 20 years old and outwards. All in Israel who are able to go forth to war, and you and Aaron shall number them, company by company." So what is God asking? He says to Moses to take a census, separate the ones that are 20 years and older, who are able to go to war. "20 years and older? Can an 18-year-old not grown enough to go to war? And also, it says just to make this more ironic, they're going into war in, I'm jumping to Deuteronomy chapter 7. This is what he says. This is the people that they're going against war. "When the Lord your God brings you into the land," verse 1, "when the Lord your God brings you into the land which you're entering to take possession of it, it clears away many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than yourself." 7 nations greater and mightier than yourself. Israel is going against 7 nations greater and mightier than themselves. This is God's words. And we're not taking the 19-year-olds with us? We're not taking the 18-year-olds with us? We're not taking the 17-year-olds with us? We're outnumbered. Why won't we take the 19-year-olds with us? Did you know if you look at to see what is the drafting age around the world, I'll start with America. Did you know that the 17-year-olds can be actually taken into the American military with their parents' permission? There's 16,000 of them per year that are admitted into the military. And yesterday I met one of them. He said that with his parents' concession, he actually was in the military. One of the fathers that I met yesterday was taken into the military. When you look at an 18 or a 19-year-old, they're physically fit. If I'm going to go against fight, I have no problem taking any of them with me. So why does God says, no. You number the 20 and above. Why? Only thing I can think of is not so much that physically they're not fit for a war. He makes a distinction in their spiritualness, in their minds. They're not mature enough yet. And you're going to say, what are you talking about? If I consent for my 17-year-old to go to war, my consension, and that boy or that girl, perhaps these days, now they can be drafted perhaps, goes to some place and takes a bullet in his brain, who's guilty of it? Did the boy have the mental capacity to make this decision that he should go to sign up for military? It was exciting perhaps for him. He was all pumped up for it, but was it the right decision? You start to scratch your head, right? It's like, we're just making philosophical argument, but God himself makes a separation between the 20 years and above for military age. He doesn't take the 19-year-olds, even though you think they're probably more fit than even 20, 21, 25, 30, because they're at their peak of their physical development. But yet he says, no, I don't want any of those people to go to war. I don't want them in the military. I don't want them to die. Number one, they're allowed to come into the land of Canaan, not because of their merit. Just God just doesn't call them responsible. He calls them, they don't know good or evil, inexperienced. Number two, he doesn't even count them as man. This is the census of the man of Israel. He doesn't even count them as man. And again, you're going to say, who would know? Would I know better than God himself who made man? I would say God probably knows better. Now let's go to, so there is a second time God makes distinction between 20 and above versus less than 20. Now this is the third time he makes a distinction. We're going to go to Numbers. Exodus 31. Exodus 30, verse 11. If you read the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of Moses, there's a lot of teachings, and you will be like scratching your head, like, what is he talking about? And this is one of them. So this is Exodus chapter 30, verse 11. The Lord said to Moses, when you take the census of the sons of Israel, then each shall give a ransom for himself to the Lord when you number them, that there will be no plague among them when you number them. Each whose number in the census shall give this, half a shekel according to the shekel of the sanctuary. The shekel is 20 gerahs. Half a shekel as an offering to the Lord. Everyone who's numbered in the census from 20 years old and outward shall give the Lord's offering. The rich shall not give more, and the poor shall not give less than the half shekel, which you give to the Lord's offering to make atonement for yourself. You shall take the atonement money from the sons of Israel and shall appoint it for the service of the tent of meeting, that it may bring to the sons of Israel the remembrance before the Lord, so as to make atonement for yourself. You read this and you go, aha, this is one of those passages I just need to kind of just skip over because I don't really know what he's asking, what's going on here. But this is what he's asking. I'll try to explain to you what's going on here. He says, number the people 20 and older. They have to give a certain amount of money for the sanctuary. Anybody who's 20 and above is going to give a certain amount of money for the sanctuary. When we come to Matthew chapter 17, when the temple tax collectors comes to Peter and ask, is your master going to give the temple tax? You guys know the story? Jesus says, go to the river, throw to the to the sea, throw your net, catch the fish, open his mouth, you'll find the money and give the tax. He's talking about this one. So this was what was happening. God instituted from the very beginning, times of Moses, that every male 20 and above is going to give, according to this, half a shekel. If anybody wants to study this to figure out what this amounts to, it seems like, I could be wrong, it's about 12 grams of gold is the correct translation of this amount. I looked up to see how much 1 gram of gold costs. It's $56 US dollars today. It says 12 grams is about $650, $700 they were to give initially to upkeep of the temple. Upkeep of the tabernacle. You know what a tabernacle is? Before the temple of God was built, there was a portable tent that God told them to have before the temple was to be built. And every male 20 and above will give a certain amount of money, which is quite substantial actually. If you think about $700, sounds little to American people, but imagine what it would be in another country. It cost every male, they felt it. This temple tax, this sanctuary tax actually was felt. It cost them. They had to give it. Even the poor had to do it. The rich had to do it. The rich wouldn't do more. The poor wouldn't do less. And what was it for? Look what are the languages that he's using. When you take the census, verse 12, of the sons of Israel, and each shall give a ransom for himself to the Lord when they number them. I looked at some of the words behind it. The word is actually kapar, K-A-P-H-A-R, means covering in Hebrew. They're giving coverings for their souls. It says in verse 14, everyone who's numbered in the census from 20 years on upwards shall give the Lord's offering. And why are they doing it? Verse 16, you shall take the atonement money from the sons of Israel and shall appoint it for the service of the tent of meeting, that it may bring the sons of Israel to remembrance before the Lord, so as to make atonement for yourself. What does atonement means? We talked about it. It comes out of two words. Et one ment. Our sin separates us from God. We need covering. We need at one ment to reunite. We're giving a financial money to bring our sins to remembrance. We're atoning, we're covering ourselves with this money. Israel, from very early on, had to understand that there are consequences to sin, so that it would be put onto the sheep or the goat that was to be sacrificed. This was one more way to remind them that they needed a covering. The language, this atonement, ransom, doesn't pass. This is like Old Testament. When Jesus comes and offers these things to us, we are so used to these words. But they were already groomed into thinking that we need to, it will cost us. Our sins will cost us. So therefore we'll give this money at covering. We will give this money to make us unite back at one with God. And this was given to 20 and above. Why not the 19-year-old? Why not the 17-year-old? Why not the 14-year-old? God makes three places. He makes distinction between 20 and above. One, to come into the land of Israel, the promised land. Two, he doesn't consider them men to go to war, even though they're going against nations more numerous and more powerful than they are. They're clearly outnumbered. Number three, he doesn't require coverings from them.
And I'm sorry, the coverings meaning the atonement or offering?
He doesn't ask them to participate in this until they're 20 and upwards.
16, isn't that what it says there? And you shall take the atonement money of the children of Israel and shall appoint it for the service of the tabernacle.
Yeah, it says, look at the verse 12. It says, when you take the census of the sons of Israel, and each shall give a ransom for himself. And verse 13, Each who is numbered in the census shall give this. Everyone who is numbered, verse 14, everyone who is numbered in the census from 20 years and old and outward shall give this Lord's offering. He's required only 20 and above.
Yeah, and then on 16 is for under, for something else.
Because it says children?
Yeah,
Well, even in that one it says children. It just means the offspring of
okay, so,
the people. The children of Israel,
oh,
Israel
the
being
children of
Jacob,
Israel, not the.
all his offspring
Okay,
are
so
children
it's
of
not
Israel.
talking about
Not by
under
age.
20, okay, thank you. Glad you clarified that, okay. I'm sorry.
So like, you're going to say, what do you make out of it? This is an Old Testament. Well, everything is a shadow, right? Old Testament was a shadow of the things to come. We're given a little bit of peace of mind of God, how he describes this population. How does he describe it? They do not know the good nor evil. Any inexperienced youth is the language God uses to describe this population. Interesting. That this is the mind of God. Early on, people that were struggling with some of these big thoughts figured out that baptism saves. So why don't we baptize children, babies, so that they won't be damned, they won't go to hell? They misunderstood how God sees this population. They thought that God is going to keep them responsible and send it to hell if they were not baptized and if they died. We will continue on, and I'll build this a little more. We'll jump into Ezekiel. (18). You can read the whole chapter, but it says in verse 14. He talks about each man is going to be judged by his own sins. But it's in 14. Please read the entire chapter so you can actually. That's why I'm recording it. That's why I hope that you would take some time to read this in context. But verse 14 says, if this man, so he talks about this father who is evil. Okay? And in verse 14 it says, if this man begets a son, this evil father begets a son, who sees all the sins which his father has done, and fears and does not do likewise, who does not eat upon the mountains or lift up his eyes to the idols of the house of Israel, does not defile his neighbor's wife, does not wrong anyone, exacts no pledge, commits no robbery, but gives his bread to the hungry, covers the naked with a garment, withholds his hand from iniquity, takes no interest or increase, observes my ordinances, and walks in my statutes, he shall not die for his father's iniquity. He shall surely live. Yet you say, verse 19, why should not the son suffer for the iniquity of his father? When the son has done what is lawful and right, and has been careful to observe all my statutes, he shall surely live. The soul that sins shall die. The son shall not suffer for the iniquity of the father, nor the father suffer for the iniquity of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon himself. What is it saying? If my father was wicked, and if I'm righteous, God is not going to count his sins against me. I'm not guilty of his sins. That's what he's saying. So how could I make a teaching because of Adam's sin, now I am guilty, therefore I need covering as little as I am? Because if I die, he's going to hold his sins against me. It's called original sin. We suffer for his sin, but we're not guilty of his sin. I'll say it again. We suffer for his sin, but we're not guilty of his sin. I die, I'm mortal today because of him, but I'm not guilty of his sin. To children of Israel, the youngster had to live in desert for 40 years because of their father's sin. They suffered for there was a consequence brought onto the children because of their father's sins, but they're not guilty of their father's sins. Marcy's walking around. She knows where we are. Does she know where we are?
She probably does. Yeah. Let's see what she'll text me if she needs something.
So it's just coincidental, she's walking around Sunday?
She brought me here.
Oh, she's just kind of getting around?
She went to the farmer's market.
Oh, I understand.
They have a Pamela cover with it.
I'm sure. Oh, you saw it?
No, I got the calendar.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Calendar.
She's almost,
She's
I don't know if it's every week or every other week.
Every week. She's in my calendar.
Now,
Okay.
Hi, Robert.
Bye, Robert. God
All the
bless.
best today. Let us know. Let us know.
Take care.
God bless you.
so that is how God views the youngsters. So we don't have to worry about the youngsters.
Okay.
We don't have to fear. And I'm gonna try to read this to you so that you can also see what perhaps how David saw this. Perhaps this is like I've been chewing on this to see how it. So David, the king of Israel, had 3 sons that were killed. There were 3 sons that actually died. He had a son with Bathsheba who died in infancy.
That was a punishment.
He had a son whose name is Amnon, who raped his sister Tamar, who was killed by Absalom. You have Absalom, who slept with his father's concubines and usurped authority to take over his father's kingdom, David's kingdom, who was killed. So he had 3 sons that died while David himself, as their father, was alive. This is a commentary that I found that kind of encapsulates perhaps the spirit that we were talking about, God, how God sees the youngsters and how David saw what took place, what happened to his sons. So this is coming from 2 Samuel 12:23. But now that he's dead, this is David's word. Now that he's dead, he's talking about the little baby that died through Bathsheba. Why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. Some people thought or said that this sentence says that I shall go to him. Someday I'm going to see him on the other side, but he cannot return to me. Right? So Ambrose of Milan has this thought. Let me just read it to you. Thus David wept for his son who was about to die, He did not grieve for him when he is dead, when dead. He wept that he might not be snatched from him, but he ceased to weep when he was snatched away, for he knew that he was with Christ. And that you may know what I declare is true, he wept for his incestuous son Amnon. So when Amnon dies, he cries. When he was killed, and he mourned for the parricide Absalom. I think parricide means somebody who sleeps with his father's wife. When he perished, saying, my son, my son, my son Absalom. He did not think that the innocent son should be mourned because he believed that the others had perished for their crime, but that the latter will live on the account of his innocence. What he's saying is, two sons that die, Amnon, who raped his sister, Absalom, who slept with his wife's concubines, when they die, David weeps and cries. And you can find that in the 1st and 2nd Samuel. The whole story is mostly in 2nd Samuel, I believe.
Excuse me, what does that word combine mean?
Concubine. Concubine is like you legally marry someone, but you can also have other wives that are not legally married to you, but they're allocated to you for life.
That was 2 Samuel, the scripture part. 2 Samuel what?
12:23. So you will find this whole stories that I mentioned to you in 2 Samuel. So why does he weep for his sons when they're older and they die, and not for his youngsters? He understood that. Look at what he says. He did not think the innocent should not be mourned because he believed that the others had perished for their crime, but that the latter will live on the account of his innocence. So he understood that the ones that are younger and God will not, they're safe with God. They're safe with God. I can't go and say they're with Christ. I looked in to see if there's some indication of what happens to the youngsters when they die. If the scriptures actually shed light onto it. The Bible is very silent on this issue. So what happens to the souls of the youngsters? The Bible is very, very, in my opinion, very silent on the issue.
Except in this particular instance where David said he didn't mourn his innocent child.
We're making assumptions. I just want you to know that it's just a commentary from a man. I'm just giving you some picture that's how we think he saw. But the scriptures don't tell us. The Father of humanity doesn't allow us to know what happens to the youngsters when they die.
He doesn't spell it out explicitly.
Correct.
For us.
Correct.
Right.
All we are doing is looking at the Old Testament, how he feels about them, his words to describe that population, and that we can just put our hearts at rest that he's not going to keep them responsible somehow if they die early. I don't know if I've indirectly answered the question, what happens to why would God allow the children to die, even in the hands of Israel? He's not as concerned about them. They're safe with him. Do they become angels? Does he give their soul back to humanity? I have no idea. The scriptures are silent. So whatever you want to, do they become the family's angels and they become like they assign angels to take care of us? I mean, your imagination can go anywhere you like. But the scriptures are silent. Even in Revelation, I cannot find anything to clarify this subject. What happens to the youngsters that die? It's clear what happens to the ones that are mature die and they've rejected God or they've chosen God. I can talk about that in a whole section. I have a clarity of where they go and what happens to them and what they await. Youngsters, I'm clueless. But just because of his words about the youngsters in the times of the Old Covenant, since it's the shadow of things and this is the heart of God, I can put my heart at rest in knowing that he calls them, they don't know the good or nor evil. Any inexperience, not because they're not evil, but God still, they have not chosen God or rejected God. They're not at that age. Once they turn that magic 20 years, something happens, God starts to include them in this group of people. They need ransom, they can serve in the military, and they are gonna not enter the promised land because their merit does not allow them. He makes that very clear distinction, almost magically with that word, with that age. I'm gonna leave that there for the time being, and we're gonna go into the next section of how do you view when somebody should become a disciple of Jesus and should be baptized? Especially since we're talking about that in the household. And if you'd like me to pause, and if you have any questions or anything that did not make sense so far, here, I'll pause this here and we can have a question.